After being provoked by the mistress, I made the scumbag leave empty-handed. It was the 3rd year of my marriage to Yann. The secretary sent photos of their bed to my phone. Without changing my expression, I forwarded the pictures to my lawyer. Soon, the lawyer sent back the organized evidence. After reviewing the materials, I signed my name on the divorce agreement without hesitation. At the same time, I called Yann. The person who answered was a sweet, delicate female voice. Yann is currently unavailable. If you have anything to say, I can pass the message along. So I hung up. Taking the opportunity, I sent over the signed divorce agreement and the lawsuit. After receiving another provocative message from the secretary, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. This marriage was finally over. Congratulations, Yann, leaving empty-handed. Yann and I both come from business families with some wealth. But our relationship wasn't a commercial alliance. We grew up together like childhood sweethearts. From school uniforms to wedding gowns, we were seen by outsiders as a perfect match made in heaven. Falling in love with Yann wasn't strange at all. Our families have been close for generations, and our mothers are best friends. It's said that even before I was born, they had already planned our engagement. Since birth, Yann and I have been inseparable. From babbling infants to bright, youthful teenagers, my life has always revolved around Yann. He's 2 months older than me and has always acted like a little adult, taking on the role of my older brother. It was his hand that led me into kindergarten. In that unfamiliar place, I was so scared I cried. Yann patiently comforted me, gave me candy, and sang songs to soothe me. Later, when I started elementary school, I did poorly on a test and felt upset. It was he who cheered me up with the candy I liked and helped me correct my mistakes. In middle school, when I got my first period and stained my skirt, I was both embarrassed and angry, sitting at my desk feeling lost. It was still Yann who ran to the supermarket to buy me sanitary pads. I don't know how he asked the clerk, but when he came back, besides the sanitary pads, he also brought heat packs and brown sugar water. When he handed me the things, I stared at his flushed face and couldn't help teasing him. "Yann, your face is so red." "No, you're seeing things," Yann said, covering his face with one hand so I couldn't see, while stuffing the items into my hands with the other. Along with the things, he also handed me his school uniform jacket. After I took care of the sanitary pads, I came out wearing his jacket. Yann was waiting outside. "Fiona, does your stomach hurt?" Yann had just asked the clerk, who said girls' stomachs often hurt at times like this. He asked while watching my expression. Seeing me nod, he panicked, "Then I'll carry you to the hospital." His overreaction made me blush deeply. "No need, it doesn't hurt that much. I'll just rest at home." So Yann carried me on his back, braving the curious stares of others all the way home. The sun was shining brightly that day. I can still remember the warmth of the sunlight on my skin. And the boy's ears, flushed red. I whispered softly into Yann's ear, "Thank you, brother Yann." The boy's neck flushed even redder. He tightened his grip and walked a little faster carrying me. I giggled quietly on his back. After starting middle school, I no longer chased after Yann calling him brother like before, I just called him by his first name. No matter how he coaxed me, I refused to call him that. I never expected that just one call would make him so shy. How amusing. Little did I know, my own expression was no less flushed than Yann's. That day, the blushing boy and girl ignited the colors of youth. The true flutter of first love probably began on that very day. The awakening of love, how beautiful it was. This tender, sweet affection lasted throughout our entire adolescence. All the way through high school. On my 18th birthday, Yann invited the whole class to celebrate and gave me his birthday wishes. He was meticulously dressed, wearing the brooch I had given him pinned to his chest. His hair was combed flawlessly. Usually composed, he stood before me holding a bouquet of roses, but when he spoke, he stammered, "Fiona, I like you. Will you be my girlfriend?" I nodded, tears welling in my eyes as I threw myself into his arms. Amid the classmates' cheers and blessings, we embraced and kissed. At that moment, my love for him reached its peak. Later he told me that although we had always been mutually in love, dating was different from being childhood sweethearts. Romance required a sense of ceremony, and a confession should start with a bouquet of flowers. So on my birthday, a special day, he formally confessed to me, turning our relationship into that of boyfriend and girlfriend. Senior year was tough and exhausting, but with Yann by my side, all I felt was sweetness. We worked hard together, practiced problems together, and watched as our scores gradually improved with each exam. Later, we both got into the same university. Actually, for both our families, we were expected to choose finance as our major, so we could eventually join the family business and take over. But I personally preferred mathematics. So after some discussion between the families, I enrolled in the math program, and Yann entered the finance department. At that time, he told me, "Fiona, you just need to do what you love. I will work hard to grow and shield you from the storms." I believed him. My parents also firmly believed in this boy who had grown up before their eyes. They had long planned that after their passing, the family business would be handed over to their son-in-law, allowing him to continue protecting their daughter. There was a knock on the door, knock, 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 and Joyce came in. "Miss, everything is packed. Tony is waiting downstairs." "Okay, let's go." Joyce and Tony had both watched me grow up since childhood. After Yann and I got married, they moved with me to our new home and took care of my daily life. I told them a year ago to slowly pack up my things in this house. Joyce didn't understand why I was doing this. But she treated me like her own daughter and, following my wishes, personally packed my belongings without entrusting anyone else. Not even Yann knew a word about this. Until today, all I have left in this house are a few cabinets of clothes. They were all bought by Yann, and I don't want to take a single piece with me. Maybe because of this, Yann never noticed my things over the past year. They've almost all disappeared. After we officially got together, my parents bought us a villa near the two companies as our marital home. Now, I've been living here for 3 years. Everything here was personally chosen by Yann and me. I've long forgotten the feelings I had when we bought these things. Without hesitation, I walked out. Outside the door, Tony was already loading the suitcase into the trunk. Behind him were several cars. They were from the cleaning company I hired. After I left, they would enter the villa and clear out everything left behind. They were very professional. In just one day, they could clean away every trace of my life. And tomorrow, this villa would be sold off cheaply by the agent. The buyer had already been found. Once the cleaning was done, they could move in with their bags in hand. On the way, my phone rang. It was Yann. "Fiona, were you trying to reach me just now?" I said nothing. "Sorry, I was busy and didn't see it earlier. Please don't be mad, my dear wife. I won't do it again next time." Yann's voice was still so clear, filled with affection, always sticky and sweet when he spoke to me. Indeed, we had only been married for 3 years, and he was just 25. 25, young and promising. He was truly the golden son-in-law envied by all the major wealthy families, but unfortunately, there was a childhood friend from an equally prestigious background who had beaten him to it. Likewise, he was the domineering CEO type adored by young girls. "Fiona, why aren't you saying anything? Did you see the message I sent you?" I asked in return. On the other end, Yann must have checked his phone again, his voice puzzled. "No message at all." "Fiona, what did you send?" As expected, the message had been deleted by the secretary. I chuckled softly and changed the subject. "When are you coming back?" This time, Yann had gone on a business trip to the neighboring city for a major project, planning to be away for a week, but it had already been over 2 days. "The project hit some snags, so I'll be delayed another 2 days, Yann said plaintively, then added coquettishly, "I miss you so much. I wish I could come home right now and hold my Fiona." I didn't soothe him as usual, just smiled. Wait until you get home, there's a surprise for you. Alright, Fiona, you're the best. After a few perfunctory words, I hung up the phone. While I was talking to Yann, the secretary sent me several photos. Yann was leaning against the headboard, wearing a loose bathrobe, his expression gentle. He spoke tender words, as if truly full of affection. Among the photos were 2 plane tickets to a scenic destination. All of this proved that Yann wasn't busy with any project at all. After fooling around with the secretary, they were off on a sweet trip together. I didn't reply to the secretary. She had already lost her purpose for me. From the start, I had sent those messages deliberately. I knew she would delete them, just like before, when she provoked me and took the chance to erase the caller ID of my calls to Yann. She thought she finally had a chance to rise. Besides, by deleting the messages, Yann wouldn't know that I had already signed the agreement and filed for divorce. Once the court ruled, our marriage would be null and void. After we get divorced, she can pretend to be unaware and take the opportunity to move up. But what she doesn't know is that she's not the first person to provoke me. I've even forgotten who sent me the first message. Maybe it was in the 2nd year of our marriage, a junior from Yann's department. Or maybe it was a young intern newly hired at his company. There were too many. But back then, Yann was only flirting with them, nothing serious developed. This secretary was the most successful, flirting with Yann for over half a year, and this time she finally got what she wanted and ended up in his bed. I looked at those posts she deliberately sent to me, the expensive gifts she flaunted, and all I felt was amusement. Does she even realize that I could sue to reclaim all those things? Of course, I've already had my lawyer prepare the lawsuit. From the very first one to the current secretary, every penny Yann spent on them, I will take back. They handed the evidence right into my hands. I don't understand why they're so brazen. Do they think that by sending me these things to provoke me, I'll get angry? I'll break down? I'll throw a huge tantrum? All I do is keep the evidence. Then I let those young girls, who know full well the man is married but still want to be the other woman, pay the price for their actions. Of course, the most detestable is the man who can't control himself. The girls like his money, want to be rich, but they're going about it the wrong way. And Yann, who can't be faithful and betrays his marriage, deserves to die. My parents were already waiting for me at home. My mom was surprised to see several suitcases in the car. Fiona, what's going on? Why did you bring so much luggage? Mom, I'm divorcing Yann. My parents froze in place, thinking I was joking. Fiona, are you sick? Why would you want to divorce Yann? My mom even reached out to touch my forehead as she spoke. Go inside and talk. I held my mom's hand and entered the living room. My dad had sent the others away. Fiona, what's going on? He asked worriedly, knowing that although I had been delicate since childhood, I was never willful. I placed the printed documents in front of my parents. They flipped through them with confusion, their expressions growing darker with each page. Seeing the latest photos, my dad slammed the papers onto the floor and cursed angrily, "That bastard actually dared to cheat, this is outrageous. I have to make sure old Sue gives my precious daughter an explanation." My mom was equally shocked, clutching my hand and unable to hold back tears. Fiona, I didn't know you had suffered so much. If I had known Yann would turn out like this, I never would have let you two be together. Yann was someone they had watched grow up, thinking they knew him best. Who would have thought that the man who had cared for their daughter since childhood, barely married, was already fooling around outside? And now, this filthy mess was being thrown right in front of their daughter. Why didn't you tell Mom earlier? Suffering alone like this, it must have been so hard on you. My mom was heartbroken. My dad stood up, his eyes red with anger. I'm calling that bastard right now, and his father too. I want to ask how they raised such a son. Dad, don't call just yet, I urged. My mom, thinking I was still attached to Yann, was both angry and anxious. You silly girl, after everything he's done to you, you still want to protect him? Yann's currently in bed with his secretary, he won't answer the phone. As for his father, I'll tell him later, I said calmly, as if I weren't talking about my unfaithful husband. Fiona, have you lost your mind from anger? Mom, I'm really okay. I want to wait until Yann comes back before telling his family. I have other things to handle these days. Mom, Dad, trust me, I won't let myself be taken advantage of. After much persuasion, my parents were finally convinced. Yann received a call for help from one of his former mistresses just as he and his secretary had gotten off the plane. On the other end, she was sobbing and crying for a long time. After hanging up, Yann's face turned ashen. Only now did he realize something was wrong. He had been on a business trip for so long, and Fiona hadn't called even once. No wonder when he last called, Fiona's voice sounded so cold. It turned out she had found out about the gifts he had given to others before. Fiona had been spoiled by both families since she was a child, she had never suffered such a great grievance. She loved him so much, and now she was probably furious. Yann was very angry, these people had taken so much from him, yet they couldn't even keep a small secret. Now it had all come out in front of Fiona. And they still expected him to help? That was pure wishful thinking. Yann hurried to call Fiona, but couldn't get through. The young secretary saw Yann's expression darken and coquettishly pouted, "Boss Yann, what's wrong? I already told you, after I came back, we have no relationship whatsoever." "Watch your words when you speak to me," Yann snapped coldly. The young secretary lowered her head in grievance. Yann was in no mood to be gentle or considerate. He got into the car and immediately told the driver to head home, completely ignoring the secretary chasing after him. Fiona actually blocked him. Yann smiled helplessly. This little girl had always been possessive of him since childhood. He hadn't expected that after all these years, she would still throw a tantrum at him, which made Yann feel as if he had returned to his youth. If he spoke a few more words with a woman, Fiona would pout, clearly displeased. He had to coax her for a long time before she would grant him a smile. "Sir, there's no curfew, you can't get in." The driver stopped the car outside the villa, awkwardly saying he didn't know what was wrong. Usually, the main gate opens automatically, but today it seemed to be malfunctioning. "Fiona's throwing a little tantrum, no worries, I'll get down myself." Yann's smile deepened on his face. This little girl, playing the game of closing the door to keep him out again. Yann got out of the car and tried the fingerprint lock, but it failed to verify. He then entered the password, still no success. Helpless, he called inside, "All right, Fiona, I'm back. Listen to me first, okay?" Footsteps immediately echoed from inside the villa. His Fiona was just like when she was little, never able to be truly harsh with him. Every time she got mad, if he coaxed her, she would come pattering over to open the door for him. Yann's smile froze the moment he saw who opened the door. Who was this? Why was there a stranger in his home? Was he a newly hired servant? The man, dressed in loungewear, poked his head outside and asked, "Who are you looking for?" "Who are you?" Yann demanded with a dark expression. The man was baffled by the question. "You're messing with my home's security system at my doorstep, shouting and yelling, and now you're asking who I am? Your home?" Yann sneered. "This is my home. Where's Fiona? Did she send you here to play along with her little act? You open the door, I don't want to talk to you." The man laughed bitterly, pointing at the front gate and then at the villa behind him. "I don't know you, and I have no idea what you're talking about. But I guess you must be looking for the previous owner of this villa. I don't know where that family moved to. I bought this villa 3 days ago, all legally and properly." "Impossible. This was the marital home Fiona and I shared, how could it have been sold to you?" Yann refused to believe it. The property management, hearing the commotion, rushed over. They knew Yann and awkwardly explained that the new owner of the villa was indeed this man. But Yann simply wouldn't accept it. In the end, The man gave the property management face and opened the door, letting Yann see for himself. Inside the villa, not a single thing belonging to him and Fiona remained. Yann looked around the empty rooms. The paintings were gone, the curtains and carpets they had chosen all disappeared. Seeing this, the man sneered, "I already told you, this house was sold to me." How could Fiona possibly bear to sell their marital home? It seemed this time he had truly hurt her heart. Yann left in a daze. When Yann came knocking, I had just finished a call with my lawyer. My mom heard from the housekeeper that Yann had arrived, and she was so angry she wanted to confront him herself. "Let him in, Mom, don't get worked up just yet," I said. Yann came in and greeted my mom, but she ignored him. He gave an awkward smile and crouched down in front of me. His voice was still gentle and affectionate. I was late, and it made my Fiona sad. I kept my head down and said nothing. Yann went on to explain, "Fiona, there's nothing going on between me and them. Those gifts were project rewards from the company, arranged and distributed by the assistant, but the assistant mistakenly charged them to my personal account. I didn't tell you at the time because I was afraid you'd misunderstand." Yann had long since prepared his excuse. After all, I was a pampered young lady who knew nothing about the twists and turns of running a company. Besides, I loved him so much. He has known me for more than 20 years and knows me very well. As long as he admits his mistake quickly enough, I can forgive him. It has always been like this over the years. But I just looked into his eyes and softly asked, "Is the view outside nice?" Yann's expression changed instantly. "You know, you still smell like your secretary's perfume." Yann hurriedly explained, "It was accidentally on me, Fiona, don't misunderstand. You know, I called you many times and even sent you messages. But you never responded to me." As I spoke, tears instantly rolled down my cheeks, looking both sorrowful and plaintive. I practiced this expression in the mirror for a long time. From this angle, I look the most fragile and vulnerable. "Fiona, don't cry, I can explain everything." Yann panicked and quickly reached out to wipe my tears, but I dodged him. I picked up my phone and showed him, one by one, the provocative messages carefully saved over the years, sent by his other woman. At the sight of the first message, Yann's face turned pale. It only worsened as I scrolled down to the messages from his secretary, from the first flirtations 6 months ago to the indecent photos from just a few days ago. Yann's face was now as white as paper. These photos and messages made his earlier excuses seem so perfunctory and insincere. "Fiona, his hands trembled as he reached out to me, but I pulled away once again. "They're all lies, all lies." Yann struggled desperately. I remained silent, tears streaming down my face. "Let's get a divorce." "No. I won't divorce you, never." Yann blurted out. Kneeling before me, he swore on his life, "Fiona, I was drunk that day, I really didn't know. Fiona, I don't want to hurt you, please don't divorce me." He was still making excuses, still lying. But I was satisfied, that was exactly what I wanted from him. This way, I would have more time to settle the property. "Fiona, please don't divorce me, I beg you. I swear I'll never make you sad again." Yann pleaded for a long time before I finally softened a little. Heartbroken, I said, "Go away. I don't want to see you right now. Let me calm down." Yann didn't want to leave, but my mom had someone chase him out. As soon as he left, I immediately wiped away my tears and waited for the lawyer to arrive. When I was chatting and laughing with the lawyer, my mom still thought I was heartbroken and confused. But she didn't know that I had been plotting this day for 3 years. Now that the fruit has finally ripened, how could I not be happy? When did I stop loving Yann? Even I have forgotten. Maybe it was on a bright and sunny afternoon. When I went to university, because our 2 majors were in different places, Yann and I could only meet briefly after class in the evenings. Later, as the coursework became heavier, we could only see each other on weekends. We did call each other every day. Our years of relationship wouldn't change because of distance. Every time we met, we never felt the slightest barrier. At first, I saw someone confessing to Yann on the school's confession wall. But I trusted him and even teased him about it. Yann was handsome, rich, and good-looking. It was only natural that people liked him. I have enough confidence and security. I wouldn't get jealous because of that. But during the few times we met, I noticed that another person's name started appearing frequently in the topics he talked about. I felt a bit uncomfortable but didn't think much of it. Until I saw a video posted by a stranger on a confession wall. The poster had captured it unintentionally, with the title, "The ship I'm shipping has come true." So sweet. I love a good gossip too, so I clicked on it. In the video, a handsome guy and a cute girl rested their heads together, smiling as they spoke. I couldn't hear what the girl said, but the guy smiled affectionately and gently stroked her head. Their eyes were full of tenderness. The bright sunlight shone on them, as if a pink filter had been added. Such a breathtaking scene of youthful love. If the guy wasn't my boyfriend Yann, I would have totally shipped them. My hands trembled with anger as I clicked into the comment section. That's when I realized this girl was the one who had confessed to Yann before. Yann had said he didn't know her, but other comments revealed her name. It was the same name that had been coming up in Yann's conversations recently. The signs had been there all along. Stumbling, I climbed out of bed, pushed open the door, and was about to confront Yann face to face. Unexpectedly, I ran into my roommate who had just returned. Seeing me in such a frantic state, she quickly asked, "Fiona, where are you going?" "I'm going to find Yann." My roommate knew about Yann and me. After a moment's hesitation, she grabbed my arm. "Fiona, do you want to know what you look like right now?" My mind was in chaos. The anger and pain from the suspected betrayal by my boyfriend made it impossible for me to think calmly. Hearing my roommate's words, I just shook my head, still wanting to run out. My roommate forcibly pulled me back into the dorm and pushed me in front of the full-length mirror. I looked up and met a face twisted with anger. Disheveled hair, tears smeared all over the face, a pajama button undone, and no shoes on my feet. Who is this? I stared blankly at the woman in the mirror. The person in the mirror showed the same confused expression as me, but still looked distorted and terrifying. How could this be me? I had never been this disheveled before. Seeing me calm down, my roommate pulled me to sit down and poured me a glass of water. Obviously, she had also seen that confession wall. That day, my roommate heard me crying and cursing, arguing for several hours. Finally, she gently said to me, "Fiona, you are Fiona. You should always be confident and radiant, living towards the sun. You shouldn't be like this right now." My roommate's family was very poor, even going to school was a problem. She had to work all the time to earn her tuition. Later, I asked my family for help to cover all her school expenses and even introduced her to a friend's family to work as a tutor. Last year, when her family ran into trouble, I helped arrange the hospital and successfully got her mother treated. Because of that, she was very grateful to me and often called me her little son. Now, hearing her say that again, I instinctively turned to look at the mirror. The reflection was still ghostly. But my roommate's words made sense. I am Fiona, I am the heir of the family. I'm not going to live my life revolving solely around Yann. I plan to confront him when we meet this weekend. After all, we've been childhood sweethearts for so many years. I truly like him and want to spend the rest of my life with him. But since he's fallen for someone else now, even though I'm very angry, I want us to part on good terms. What I never expected was that Yann would act as if nothing had happened. That weekend, he brought the cake I liked, speaking and moving with the same intimacy as before. I didn't understand what he meant. So I asked him directly. I said, "Yann, have you been cheating on me?" Yann denied it outright. I pulled out the video I had saved. After watching it, he sighed with a mix of helplessness and affection. "Fiona, it's just a matter of perspective. Many of us were discussing the issue there. Look here, aren't there other people as well? So it turns out my dear Fiona is jealous, huh? I'll be sure to be more careful from now on, absolutely no giving others a chance to spread rumors. Yann was as gentle as ever, his eyes full of love for me. The hand that fell on my head was still as warm as ever. But my whole body felt like it had plunged into an ice cave. I had lived for 20 years, known Yann for 20 years. Only today did I realize that, in Yann's heart, I was actually a fool. That kind of distance, those intimate little gestures, he thought they were nothing. And his explanations were just as full of holes, completely insincere. So perfunctory that if I asked a few more questions, he would slip up. Seeing that I said nothing, he shook my hand gently and coaxed, "Fiona, we're going to get married someday. You have to give me a little more confidence." Yes, marriage, I was going to marry Yann. So, because we were going to get married, was he allowed to flirt with others? Flirt around, and still have me waiting at home for him to marry me. In that moment, I felt the person I had loved for so many years suddenly rot away. I didn't sentence Yann to death over this one incident, but as I watched more closely afterward, I discovered several others with whom Yann was flirting. They made no real progress, but the tone of their voices, those intimate little gestures, all revealed that their relationship was anything but ordinary. It all declared to me that Yann was just that kind of scumbag. I really was blind and heartless, only seeing this person clearly after 20 years. I recalled everything over the years with Yann, and the more I thought about it, the more disgusted I felt. From that day on, I secretly enrolled in finance-related courses, studying until I was dazed every day. Because I didn't know if Yann truly loved me or had other motives. The wealth accumulated by my family over generations absolutely could not be ruined by me. Fortunately, I still had my roommate. When my roommate learned of my plan, she immediately switched majors and went to the finance department. After graduation, I arranged for my roommate to join Yann's family business. After all, helping a classmate find a job in their field was far too easy. I even specifically asked Yann to look out for my roommate, so whenever my roommate handled matters at the company, it was always under Yann's name. No one would suspect me. They wouldn't doubt this hopeless romantic fool. Over the years, all they saw was how deeply I loved Yann. Whenever rumors drifted to my ears, I firmly believed in my lover, never once confronting Yann about them, content to stay at home as Mrs. Yann. Everyone said I was a hopeless romantic. A top student from a prestigious school, rushing to get married right after graduation, then settling down as a full-time housewife. I showed no interest in my family's huge company, leaving all the projects to my husband to manage. Yann was destined to inherit two families simultaneously. When that happened, the two families would become one. This rumor had circulated in high society ever since Yann and I got married. Everyone tacitly accepted that the two families would merge in the future. Therefore, many far-sighted CEOs sought to collaborate with Yann, hoping to seize the opportunity and later share a piece of the pie once the families merged. Their idea wasn't wrong, the two companies really are about to become one. But it's not him. It's me, my family, Fiona's family. Yann's fortune and his shares in the family, after the lawyer reviewed the evidence and agreements, will all be transferred to my name. And after marriage, whenever a mistress provokes me, I pick a project and hint to Yann that their family wants to get involved. A man who's just cheated is the most insecure and guilty. That's how most of their family's profitable projects ended up in my hands. Yann never suspected a thing and, afraid I'd be overthinking, transferred the projects willingly. After all, the two families are so close they're inseparable. Does it really matter whose hands they're in? I acted for 5 years. I acted so convincingly that all our friends knew I deeply loved Yann. So much so that when our families discussed the wedding, they never even considered a prenuptial agreement. So much so that Yann had no defenses against me before or after the marriage. Yann even went so far as to show his sincerity in front of both families. He signed a prenuptial agreement, promising that if we ever divorced, no matter the reason, he would leave with nothing. He also added a supplementary clause. If the divorce was because he wronged me, all his shares in the family business would be transferred to me without compensation. At 22, Yann held my hand, his eyes brimming with love. Fiona, I swear I will never betray you. This prenuptial agreement will never come into effect. This is my promise to you. You will always have a way out. How did I act at that time? Oh, I remember, I cried. I was so moved that tears streamed down my face as I clung to him, begging him not to sign such a thing. But he insisted, and in front of both families as witnesses, he personally signed the agreement. Both families even went so far as to notarize the agreement. After receiving the notarized document, I threw a little tantrum, wanting to lock this unlucky agreement away in a little black room. The elders from both sides teased me, saying I was acting like a child despite my age. Over all these years, no one ever mentioned the agreement again. Even Yann forgot that I still had this document in my possession. What he didn't know was that the moment I got the agreement, I immediately encrypted it layer upon layer in my private safe, protecting this treasure with utmost care. This was the grave Yann had dug for himself. Of course, I had to be extremely cautious. When the lawyer came again, he brought a thick stack of documents. I carefully checked them one by one, and when I saw that their latest project had also been transferred to me, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Giselle, you even managed to get this into my hands. The girl beside me also laughed. Even the smallest mosquito is still meat. Our president Yann worked hard on a business trip for a whole week to secure this project. How could we let his goodwill go to waste? Giselle is my roommate. Over the years, she has worked in the Yann family business, cooperating with me both inside and out. We share an inseparable bond. She is grateful for the help I gave her in the past. In fact, she is the one who truly saved me. If she hadn't pulled me back in time that day and made me see clearly, I would have spent my whole life living in a dream. In the end, I would have only ended up with a cheating husband and the Fu family's legacy falling into someone else's hands. When I was young, I could still be Mrs. Yann. But when beauty fades and the years slip away, all that's left is to be swept out the door. My whole life would become nothing but a joke. I reviewed the documents and signed my name on them. Giselle is now an executive in the Yann family business, holding some shares. Over the years, she had gradually acquired some scattered shares, and now she transferred all those shares to me. At this point, the shares I hold have surpassed those of Yann's father. I patiently waited a few more days until the court's verdict arrived. Because of the prenuptial agreement and Yann being the party at fault, the court granted the divorce outright. With the judgment in hand, I immediately convened a shareholders' meeting at the Yann family business. At that moment, Yann was still standing at my doorstep holding flowers. He declared that he was determined to win me back and begged for my forgiveness. Yann's father looked at me with a strange, unfamiliar gaze as I spoke confidently at the shareholders' meeting. It was as if he had never known me before. When I presented the projects held by our company, as well as those currently under their family's control, the shareholders exchanged knowing glances. They were only interested in receiving dividends. Naturally, they supported whoever could make them money. After I finished explaining everything, I smiled and looked around at the others. So, does anyone have any objections to the choice of the new chairman? Except for Yann's father, all the shareholders sided with me. After all, the projects they were involved in now bore our family's mark. If we ever turned against each other, Yann's family business would soon be sidelined. Fiona, after all, we are family. Yann's father sounded as if he had aged 10 years, his voice rough. Sorry, I already divorced Yann this morning. Now, with your family, it's just a business relationship. Only then did he remember the agreement signed back then. Fiona, Yann did nothing wrong. The court won't grant the divorce. I smiled at him and tossed over a file. If you say that the photos of Yann with the secretary sent to my phone don't count as fault, then I have nothing more to say. Yann's father immediately fell silent. He looked at the documents, his hands trembling with anger. Yann was called to the company by his father and was scolded harshly. He was confused. It wasn't until he saw the judgment that Yann finally broke down. Impossible, how could the court rule this way? I never received any notice. This is fake. I'm going to sue. But the judgment was clear. He was informed of the divorce agreement and the fault lawsuit, with no objections. Therefore, he had no chance to appeal. I never saw any notification, he said, staggering over to me for confirmation. Fiona, you never sent me the agreement, right? You lied to me, didn't you? I did send it. I smiled gently and had my assistant block him, my smile warm and kind. The night you slept with the secretary, I sent the agreement. The evidence clearly states that you were informed and had no objections. The color drained completely from Yann's face. He remembered, I had even asked him if he received it when he called. But he really hadn't seen it. No, when he went to take a shower, the secretary had tampered with his phone. It was that woman's doing. Yann collapsed to the floor, hating the secretary with all his heart. His father, frustrated with his failure, kicked him and told him to apologize to me. I had no time to watch their pathetic act. I said directly, Uncle, you know I feel sick whenever I see Yann now. He should just voluntarily resign from his position at the company. He leaves the business and never shows his face to me again. I guarantee you'll get every penny of your dividends, or else, I tapped the resignation letter on the table, speaking coldly, your family won't exist anymore. And now, Yann is coming with me to handle the divorce paperwork. Yann snapped back to reality and tried to apologize and cling to me, but Sue's father slapped his head aside. What are you still making a fuss about? Do you have to destroy the family before you stop? Yann's father personally escorted Yann to complete the paperwork with me. Yann held the divorce certificate, still in disbelief, murmuring, how could this be? Fiona likes me so much, she loves me so much, how could she really divorce me? I ignored them and went straight home. Not long after, the lawsuit to reclaim the marital property was won, and I received the full compensation. I finally confessed everything I had done over the years to my parents. My mom was both heartbroken and regretful, wiping away tears non-stop. After all, my dad had been navigating the business world for so many years. Once the size settled, he quickly set about arranging for me to inherit the family enterprise. I was busy inheriting the family business, busy transferring shares, busy with social engagements. Giselle had now become the second largest shareholder in Yann's company, and together we were both overwhelmed with work. Though exhausting, the feeling of having money and power in my hands was truly wonderful. At the banquets, no one would ever call me Mrs. Yann again. They called me Fiona Dong. No one would mention that lovesick Miss Fu from the Fu family anymore. I was no longer anyone's subordinate, nor would I lose myself for anyone. When I heard the news that Yann had been imprisoned, I had just signed a major project in collaboration with the government. At first, I thought it was just a rumor. It wasn't until the official announcement came out that I realized Yann had found out the secretary deleted his information, which led to his forced divorce. He believed the secretary was the one who ruined his marriage and caused his family to be expelled from the family conglomerate. In a fit of rage, he accidentally pushed the secretary down the stairs. She died on the spot. I only expressed a few words of sympathy before my attention was quickly diverted by a new project brought by Giselle. The past no longer concerned me. Just as she said years ago, I, Fiona, am meant to thrive in the sunlight.